Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Javad Tehami and these are the headlines. In Afghanistan, the Taliban say 35 civilians have been killed in attacks by the government troops during the past 2 weeks. In a statement, they urged international human rights organizations to help prevent such brutalities. Meanwhile, President Ashraf Ghani said the Afghan forces have played a key role in fighting terrorism. Pakistan is observing the second anniversary of Operation Swift Retort as Surprise Day. The day is being commemorated to pay tribute to Pakistan Air Force that downed 2 Indian fighter jets after they violated Pakistan's airspace and captured Indian pilot Wing Commander Abhinandan Varthaman. President Arif Alvi said he salutes Pakistan's valiant forces and the nation for showing resolve against India's military misadventure 2 years ago. Prime Minister Imran Khan said Pakistan responded with determined resolve at a time and a place of its choosing. Addressing a ceremony, Air Chief Marshal Mujahid Anwar Khan said Pakistan's desire for peace should not be misunderstood. Myanmar's ruling military has fired the country's ambassador to the United Nations, Kyaw Mo Tun. This comes after the envoy urged the UN to use any means necessary to reserve the February 1 military coup. Meanwhile, a woman has been shot dead and over 100 arrested as police ramped up its crackdown against the anti-coup protests. In Nigeria, police have launched a search and rescue operation for 317 girls kidnapped from a school in the state of Zamfara. The United Nations has condemned the incident and called for their safe release. Earlier, 42 people kidnapped in a similar incident in Niger State were released almost after a week. The U.S. House of Representatives has passed President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief package. The lower chamber passed the sweeping measure by a vote of 219 to 212 and sent it to the Senate. Meanwhile, Pakistan has registered over 1,300 new cases and 33 deaths overnight, taking its toll to 12,837. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 2.5 million lives and infected over 113 million people. And in the Pakistan Super League, Peshawar Zalmi are chasing the 119-run target against Islamabad United at the National Stadium in Karachi. United were all out in the 18th over thanks to 4 quick dismissals by Wahab Riaz. Earlier, Karachi Kings beat Multan Sultans by 7 wickets. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. In Afghanistan, the Taliban say 35 civilians have been killed in attacks by the government troops during the past 2 weeks. In a statement, they said the Afghan forces carried out 43 airstrikes and ground attacks targeting civilians across the country. The group urged international human rights organizations to help prevent such brutalities. Meanwhile, President Ashraf Ghani said Afghan forces have played a prominent role in fighting terrorism. He said the world community has kept Afghans away from their basic rights over the last 4 decades. The president said violence in the country must end and there should be no more bloodshed. Pakistan is celebrating the second anniversary of Operation Swift Retort when Pakistani forces responded to Indian aggression. The Pakistan Air Force downed 2 Indian fighter jets for violating airspace and captured a pilot. President Arif Alvi said he salutes Pakistan's valiant forces and the nation for showing resolve against India's military misadventure 2 years ago.
Prime Minister Imran Khan said, being a proud nation, Pakistan responded with determined resolve at a time and place of its choosing. In a tweet, Khan said Pakistan showed the world its responsible behavior by returning the captured Indian pilot. He also welcomed the restoration of ceasefire along the line of control. The Prime Minister added the onus of creating an enabling environment for further progress rests with India. Meanwhile, armed forces said Pakistan stands for peace, but it will respond with might when challenged. Addressing a ceremony at Air Headquarters Islamabad, Air Chief Marshal Mujahid Anwar Khan said Pakistan Air Force response to Indian aggression made the nation proud. He said Pakistan's desire for peace should not be misunderstood. Pakistan Air Force jets, including JF-17 Thunder, also presented flypast in the ceremony. In a tweet, the military's media wing said Pakistan Air Force will always defend the country against all threats. Earlier, the Foreign Office reiterated that aggressors will be met with the same response in case of any misadventure.
Pakistan is observing the second anniversary of Operation Swift Retort as the Surprise Day. The day is being commemorated to pay tribute to the pilots of the Pakistan Air Force who downed 2 Indian fighter jets after they violated Pakistan's airspace. More in this report.
It all started after India issued belligerent statements of attacking Pakistan following its false flag operation in Pulwama that killed 40 Indian soldiers. To act on its nefarious designs, the Indian Air Force conducted a strike in Pakistan's town of Balakot, which the Pakistan Air Force promptly responded to the next day. Pakistan Air Force shot down 2 Indian jets that flew 4 kilometers inside Pakistan's territory, violating its airspace.
It was close to 10 in the morning. I heard a loud explosion after our jets broke the sound barrier. I received news on the telephone that our response against the Indian aggression was underway and also the downing of an Indian jet. I ordered my troops to mobilize and sent the quick reaction force to crash site to cordon off the area.
Pakistan Air Force jets shot down India's MiG-21 and another jet Su-30. Pakistan Army caught one of the Indian pilots, Wing Commander Abhinandan Varthaman, who was being thrashed by a mob of local people.
We rescued pilot Abhinandan, searched him, provided him with first aid, and then brought him to unit's headquarters. Later, we handed him over to military hospital for a thorough checkup. I checked his vital signs and gave him a painkiller and other fluids and addressed his injuries. I kept him at the headquarters for 2 hours to make sure he was okay and had no life-threatening issues. Later, on the instructions of Brigadier Headquarters Director, I took him to another medical facility where he was examined again.
The Indian Wing Commander also acknowledged the professionalism of Pakistan Armed Forces.
At that instant, 2 soldiers of Pakistan Army came and rescued me. One of them, who was a captain, took me to their unit where I was given first aid. Later, I was taken to a hospital for further treated. I find the Pakistan Army a very fine professional force and very chivalrous. I am very impressed by the chivalry which was being displayed by the Pakistan Army.
Pakistan's brave pilots proved their mettle and dominance in the air warfare domain and outsmarted the Indian Air Force.
I was in my unit's area when I noticed a lot of aerial activity. Meanwhile, we heard an explosion in the sector where I saw a MiG-21 Bison plummeting towards the earth as a fireball. I was ordered to take the downed pilot to a secure site.
New Delhi's false flag operation of Pulwama was exposed during the recent chat leaks of Indian firebrand journalist Arnab Goswami. The leak strengthened Pakistan's narrative of striving for peace and laid bare India's hostile activities in the region.
And for more on this, we are joined by Air Marshal Masood after retired from Islamabad. So thank you very much for your time at Indus News. Don't you think that Pakistan's Operation Swift retort brutally dented the myth of India's military supremacy in South Asia?
While I don't wish to be arrogant about it, but yes, it did. I think what they wanted to achieve by retaliating in daylight hours with the entire world watching and taking out targets, showing full capability that we can take targets out, and then, of course, shifting the queue a little bit so that we don't kill some people and give them a chance to retaliate. I think not only that we re-established political and military deterrence, but we also did not let them counterattack, because they fully well knew that the capability that we have shown, if they retaliate and we counter-retaliate, then the ladder is going to go out of control, the escalation ladder. So I think we did very well.
Sir, how significant was Pakistan's gesture of returning the captured Indian pilot in terms of elevating its position in the Committee of Nations as a peace-loving nation?
I only hope, wish and pray that they do note this. But remember, please remember, in international relations, there is no morality. And whoever is the strongest will carry the day. We showed our strength, then we showed our morality and decency, and that doubled and redoubled our effort so that we do not give a chance to India, and that the world powers, they note this and do not let this escalate into a full-fledged conflict. So the credit of establishing deterrence and for avoiding escalation beyond control, I think we can respectfully claim to be ours.
Air Marshal Masood Akhtar, sir, thank you very much for talking to Indus News. We really appreciate that. And to talk more about this, we have Air Commodore Iftikhar Bajwa retired with us. So thank you for your time at Indus News. 27th of Feb was quite a surprise that rendered a huge shock to India. How do you see Pakistan's victory over the Indian aggression?
Surprise day, I don't think, first of all, that the response was a surprise to them. I'm sure if they had done this aggression, and they must have been expecting some sort of response. But the type of response itself and the time of response and what we achieved out of this response must be a surprise to them. So I'm sure I can say it with full confidence that it was certainly a job well done by the pilots and the whole Air Force and the Defense Forces of Pakistan. And they got a very befitting response. Perhaps they may not have been expecting what we finally were able to do, alhamdulillah, with the grace of Allah Almighty. And it was definitely a very befitting thing that we did to them.
So Pakistan has been warning the world against possible false flag operation by India. Do you think India would ever dare to cross the line again after this lesson?
Under the given situation and circumstances, statistically speaking, I don't think India is in a position to do this, especially in the wake of the response they got from Pakistan as a result of our operation against their aggression. And furthermore, their economic situation and their internal disturbances, I don't think would allow them to get into any such venturing. And they may have a euphoria of having a Rafale thing, and maybe when the Rafales are operational down the line in 3 years or so, because an aircraft induction itself doesn't mean anything unless it gets operational, they may have a feeling after 3 years that they have some sort of confidence to undertake such venturing. I don't think at present they're in a position to, but we being Pakistanis and looking into the history, we should always be on guard. Because there may be some venturing from their side to divert the internal situation, what is happening in East Punjab. They may do something, but I think the chances to me are reasonably remote that they will get into any such thing anytime soon.
Air Commodore Iftikhar Bajwa, sir, thank you very much for time at Indus News. We really appreciate that. Now moving on, it has been 19 years since a mob of Hindu extremists massacred over 2,000 Muslims in India's state of Gujarat. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who was then the Chief Minister of the state, turned a blind eye to the violence, allowing the carnage. More in this report.
On 27th of February 2002, a fire ripped through a train at Godhra station in Gujarat, burning 59 Hindu pilgrims alive. Although an independent inquiry concluded the fire was accident, Muslims were wrongfully blamed for the blaze. Subsequently, furious Hindu mobs rampaged through Muslim neighborhoods. During the slaughter in Ahmedabad and hundreds of other towns and villages, Hindu mobs rounded up and raped Muslim women. Senior police officers even testified that Chief Minister Modi had ordered officers not to intervene as the killings spread. The bloody riots tarred Modi's international image, leading him to be blacklisted for a decade by the US and the EU. An Indian court found 31 Hindus guilty of murdering 33 Muslims, but most of the perpetrators of violence have gone scot-free. Modi continues to push anti-Muslim policies with moves such as the controversial citizenship law and abrogation of occupied Kashmir's special status. The majoritarian attitude has even extended to farmers who have been protesting against the farm laws for nearly 3 months. Last year, a report by the US Commission on International Religious Freedom categorized India as a country of particular concern over the treatment of minorities.
In India, more farmers are heading towards Delhi borders to join the protest against 3 agriculture laws. Growers from over 700 villages of Punjab are travelling on buses and trains to reach the capital's borders. Farmers have yet another event scheduled for Women's Day on March the 8th, when women are expected to move to borders. Earlier, UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet urged India to find an equitable solution to the farmers' crisis. Bachelet also criticized New Delhi's actions against activists and journalists covering the protest. In a statement, she also condemned India's efforts to curb freedom of expression on social media. Saudi Arabia has rejected US reports' findings that the Crown Prince approved the plan to kill or capture Jamal Khashoggi in 2018. In a statement, the Saudi Foreign Ministry termed the report negative and false. The ministry said the journalist's killing was a heinous crime by a rogue group. It said the US intelligence report contains inaccurate information and conclusions. Earlier, the US sanctioned 76 Saudis, including senior intelligence officials, under a new policy, the Khashoggi ban. President Joe Biden said he told the Saudi king he will hold them accountable for human rights abuses.
I spoke yesterday with the king, not the prince. Made it clear to him that the rules are changing, and we're going to be announcing significant changes today and on Monday. We are going to hold them accountable for human rights abuses.
More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The coalition forces in Yemen have destroyed a Houthis missile launched towards civilian areas in southern Saudi Arabia. In a statement, the coalition said it is taking operational measures to protect civilians in line with the international humanitarian law. This is the third Houthi attack launched towards Saudi Arabia in the last 24 hours. Earlier, Arab coalition thwarted 2 attacks by the Houthis, one of which was targeted at Khamis Mushaid city. President Joe Biden says Iran cannot act with impunity and warned it to be careful after the US airstrikes in Syria. Biden authorized airstrikes on Iranian-backed militia in eastern Syria in response to rocket attacks against the US targets in Iraq. Earlier, White House spokesperson Jen Psaki said attacks against Americans will not go unnoticed. She added President Biden has the right to take action at the time and the manner of his choosing when there are threats to the US interests. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson Saeed Khatibzadeh strongly condemned the strikes. Khatibzadeh described the attack as illegal aggression and a violation of human rights and international law. Meanwhile, the Syrian foreign ministry also said the attack in the east of the country is a cowardly act. In a statement, it urged Biden not to follow the law of the jungle. Iraq's Foreign Minister Fuad Hussein has met with his Iranian counterpart Javad Zarif during a visit to Tehran. This comes 2 days after the U.S. carried out airstrikes against Iran-backed militia in eastern Syria. In a statement, Iraqi Foreign Ministry said Hussein will discuss regional development, including ways to balance ties with Tehran. Earlier, Iran's top security official Ali Shamkhani said U.S. airstrikes encourage terrorism in the region. He met the Iraqi foreign minister and stressed the need to confront the U.S. in the region. It is Hussein's second visit to Iran in a month. In Iraq, 5 people have died after security forces fired live ammunition to disperse anti-government protesters. Iraqi High Commission for Human Rights says hundreds of people have been injured during clashes in the southern city of Nasiriyah. It said these include several members of the security forces who got injured as protesters retaliated to fires. Following the deaths, Iraq's Prime Minister has removed the governor of the province, which was one of the major demands of the protesters. Nearly 600 people have been killed in protest-related violence in Iraq since late 2019. The European members of the UN Security Council have called on Israel to stop demolitions of the Bedouin settlements in the Jordan Valley. The UK, France, Ireland, Norway and Estonia issued a joint statement at the end of a monthly session of the Security Council on the Middle Eastern conflict. The statement expressed concerns at the recent demolitions and confiscation of donations by Israeli authorities in the Jordan Valley. It called on Israel to allow full, sustained and unimpeded humanitarian access to the community in Hamza al-Baqaya. The Jordan Valley is a strategic patch of land that has emerged as a flashpoint in the struggle over the West Bank. Myanmar's ruling military has fired the country's ambassador to the United Nations, Kor Morton. This comes a day after the envoy urged the UN to use any means necessary to reverse the February 1 military coup. He had told the United Nations General Assembly that he was speaking on behalf of ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi. The ruling junta accused the ambassador of abusing his power and betraying the country. Meanwhile, a woman has been shot dead and over 100 arrested as police ramped up its crackdown against the anti-coup protests. China and Russia have urged the international community to avoid interfering in Myanmar's internal affairs. In Nigeria, police have launched a rescue operation for 317 girls kidnapped from a school in the state of Zamfara. The United Nations has condemned the incident and called for their safe release. Earlier, 42 people kidnapped in a similar incident in Niger State were released almost after a week. Kidnappings for ransom by armed groups are common across many northern Nigerian states. The unrest has become a political problem for President Muhammadu, who is under criticism over recent high-profile attacks. In December last year, gunmen kidnapped nearly 350 boys in Katsina State, who were later rescued by the security forces. Brazil has reported more than 1,300 new COVID-19 deaths as its toll reached over 252,000. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 2.5 million lives and infected over 113 million people. More in this report.
The shortages of coronavirus vaccines causing more global divides and skepticism over certain vaccines are proving to be the major obstacles in battle against pandemic. In Brazil, prosecutors are seeking suspension of purchasing India's COVID-19 vaccine over concerns that it has not yet completed its phase 3 clinical trials. This came as rising cases filling Brazil's intensive care wards to the brim forced its capital city to impose a lockdown. In U.S., President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion plan to address the toll of pandemic has been advanced to the House of Representatives for debate. Food and Drug Administration's advisor panel voted in favor of authorizing Johnson & Johnson's vaccine for emergency use. Meanwhile, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's head said a recent decline in COVID-19 cases may be stalling.
Over the last few weeks, cases and hospital admissions in the United States had been coming down since early January, and deaths had been declining in the past week. But the latest data suggests that these declines may be stalling, potentially leveling off at still a very high number. We at CDC consider this a very concerning shift in the trajectory.
The UN Security Council has demanded the parties to all conflicts to engage immediately in sustained ceasefire to allow for vaccinations. World Health Organization says countries making individual deals for vaccines threaten supply for COVAX program for developing countries. Meanwhile, European countries are urging public to take AstraZeneca's vaccine, seeking to stem skepticism about its effectiveness that is leaving many supplies unused.
If I look at the numbers, I believe that it's to do with the organization giving out appointments until we get things underway better in all the federal states. We are also familiar with the discussion that there may be a few people who aren't taking up the offer of a vaccine. We urgently advise people to get vaccinated. This vaccine is safe and effective. It offers protection just like the other two vaccines.
The Czech government has also announced strict new restrictions over the next 3 weeks to slow the fast spread of infections. Meanwhile, G20 nations have warned against the uneven distribution of vaccines as leaders consider how to create even footing for recovery from the pandemic.
In Bison, 33 more patients of novel coronavirus have died overnight. The health ministry says the nationwide death toll has risen to 12,837. The ministry said over 39,000 tests were conducted in the past 24 hours, of which 1,315 returned positive. So far, nearly 579,000 people have been infected in the country, while over 544,000 have recovered. The ministry said the number of active cases stands at 21,554. It said the number of patients admitted to the hospitals has dropped below 2,000. The U.S. Justice Department has charged more than 300 people for taking part in the deadly storming of the Capitol Hill on January the 6th. In a statement, the department said at least 280 have been arrested so far. It said the investigation into those responsible is moving at a speed and a scale that is unprecedented. The statement read the department will not tolerate any form of domestic terrorism or hate-based violent extremism. A Federal Bureau of Investigations official said domestic extremists have increasingly posed a grave threat for several years. He said anti-government extremist threats mark the biggest threat in 2020 and remain a top concern. Golf great Tiger Woods says he is in good spirits after being moved to a new Los Angeles hospital for treatment from injuries he sustained in a car crash. In a tweet, the golfing champion said he has received a successful follow-up procedures at the hospital. Woods suffered a fractured leg and shattered ankle in Tuesday's accident. Police said he will not face criminal charges over the single car crash. They said Woods had been driving alone along a downhill stretch of the road that has high frequency of accidents. Earlier this week, Los Angeles police said there was no evidence Woods had been impaired by drugs or alcohol at the time of the crash. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In Sri Lanka, elephants decorated with colorful cloths, ornaments and lights paraded across the streets of the capital as the annual Navama Pirahira festival is underway in Colombo.
The pageant started from the Gangaramaya temple when Lankan President Goteba Rajapaksa placed the casket of the sacred relics on the caparisoned elephant. The musicians, dancers, and elephants were all gathered at the temple from where they took off on the parade route. The procession was witnessed by many locals and tourists. The event usually attracts crowds of both local and foreign visitors. However, there were fewer this year amid the coronavirus, and the parade was also shortened from the usual 3.5 kilometers route.
In Denmark, dark winter skies have brightened up as the annual Lights Festival is underway in the Danish capital Copenhagen. More in this report.
The extremely expressive yet quiet Copenhagen Light Festival has provided citizens with much needed light during the cold winter season and stressful times due to the pandemic. Visitors are enjoying the illuminated buildings and artwork at the 23-day festival in the Danish capital, while also adhering to the coronavirus safety precautions.
I think it's really just what people need right now, sort of a grown-up treasure hunt, moving from one piece of art to another, each of them inviting for a moment of reflection, having a thought about, what life is about these days. And I think that has been taken down very well by our visitors.
The light installations are mostly located in and around Copenhagen city center. Amid COVID-19, guided tours, talks, and pop-up events have been cancelled this year. However, they have been replaced with an interactive map to help the visitors in finding their routes and information about the light installations in the city.
We have no enclosures or things that forces people to be together. They can watch it from a distance, or they can go on the other side of the canal. So there's a big area and many routes that they can choose from. Also, we have the app that guides people so that they can find their own way and their own tempo. So we have no problem with people getting too close.
The festival is taking place for the 4th year now, and around 30 light installations have been placed around Copenhagen.
In the Pakistan Super League, Peshawar Zalmi are chasing a target of 119 runs against Islamabad United at the National Stadium in Karachi. United were bowled out in the 18th over thanks to 4 quick dismissals by Wahab Riaz. Alex Hales remained the top scorer with 41 runs, while Hussain Talat added 22. Earlier, Karachi Kings beat Multan Sultans by 7 wickets. They chased down the target of 196 runs in the 19th over. Thanks to Babar Azam's 90, he was declared player of the match for his stellar knock. In the Singapore Open, Australia's Lexi Popyrin upsets Croatian third seed Marin Cilic in straight sets. With this win, the Australian has booked his place into the final of the competition. Cilic broke Popyrin's serve and went 4-1 up early in the first set. But Popyrin kept his cool and served 15 aces to Cilic's 9 to win the 2 tiebreakers. The Australian will face Kazakhstan's world number 46 Alexander Bublik in the final. French Open champion Iga Swiatek beats Belinda Bencic in straight sets to win the Adelaide International title. This is her 2nd career title win after she became the youngest woman to capture the Roland Garros crown. Swiatek did not drop a set throughout the WTA 500 tournament and lost only 22 games in all. She faced 22 winners and made only 6 unforced errors in the final. Meanwhile, the 19-year-old Pole has joined a growing list of top players pulling out of the Qatar Open. On Wednesday, world number 1 Ash Barty withdrew from the tournament in Doha with a leg injury. In the World Rally Championship, Estonian driver Ott Tänak of Hyundai has extended his lead in the Arctic Rally after claiming 2 wins out of the 3 stages in Finland. Tänak now holds a slim lead over Toyota's Kalle Rovanperä. The Finnish driver passed Tänak's teammate Craig Breen for 2nd place overall, leaving the Irish behind at 3rd. Belgium's Thierry Newell finished off 4th, while Sebastian Ogier came in 8th for Toyota. Tänak had already set the fastest time in the shakedown and was quickest in the snow in the 2-tire punishing stages. And that's all for now. With the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.